Well, how are we doing? How are we doing on this terrific Tuesday? Another great day that we get to be alive and be able to navigate. This is Dr. Gregory Clarke Sr. And of course, I welcome all of you here to the Comeback Conversations with Dr. Clarke. And, we're going to have a great teaching tonight around why money and the reason why that is so important because past couple of weeks we've been delving into the mindset aspect of it. Now we're going to deal into some of the aspects of the why. How did we get here? How did we get into the point that we needed resources? How did we get to the point that things started to become in a space that was being shaped, that we needed commerce, that we needed to go back and forth with some form of exchange? And it goes back to so many different things that predate the United States, predate we're gonna go a little further back, but we're gonna make it, fun and have some sort of, camaraderie with it. And so I'm so happy that members of the Comeback Collective Circle are starting to populate in and join in on this fine day. And my monologue, which I usually begin off, is not going to be too long. Right now, we're in a space where things are moving here in the United States in a different pattern. We're in a holding pattern with this particular conflict in the Middle East, which is attempting to help with some form of economic easement, but we don't know how long that's going to last. We still have too many wars going around the world. So when we go geopolitically, Ukraine and Russia, United States and Iran, um, there's probably conflicts all over the place that we're not saying. So let us be very mindful as we go into tonight's teaching. The reason why we're delving in and going into some of the foundational spaces about money, because a lot of these conflicts is usually that's what it ends up really being about. It's about gathering someone else's natural resources or controlling someone else's land because they have something that someone else desires. And it may sound very simple, but it's not simple because war, usually someone's making money in war. Like right now, we talk about the United States. Every time you hear a drone or a missile or a bullet being shot, someone has to make another one. Someone's going to replace that. Who does that? The defense contractors. So someone is making money. But at the same time, if you talk about it from a standpoint of the United States, that means that's our tax dollars moving in a particular realm on something that you don't even have a decision over. Those who we had put in, well, I know I didn't vote for him. So for those who put this particular gentleman in office, even though he's still our president, they make decisions with our dollars that may not necessarily be things that we agree with. But if this is what the majority voted for, or based upon, as they say, the electoral college, and we have what we have. So let's just be very mindful. We're going to be hearing a lot of stuff about different primaries, different parts of the country. And remember, every vote is important. I know here in the New York City area, there's no real major things that we have to vote for in 2026, other than probably our House of Representative people, or but every voting cycle is important. I don't care if you're voting for your school board. I don't care if you're voting for your councilman. I don't care if you're voting for, the person who's going to pick up the trash. If that's who you get to vote for, every vote is important. So please, let's be mindful and be remembering that we should make sure that we actualize our right to vote. So we can't get upset if you didn't vote. If you're not part of the process, you didn't vote. If they're spending your money in ways that you don't desire it to be, did you vote? So if you did vote, then you have a right to argue because now you're part of the process. Without further ado, I see some great people here tonight. Welcome everyone. Welcome all the members. I see Gregory Clarke Jr. I see Miss Johnson. See Miss Gaskins. And I see the one and only Dr. Shaw Clarke. And I know others have popped in and popped out, so they should be coming back in very shortly. So without further ado, let us get into the teaching. Let's see. Let us get into the teaching. I desire not to be labeled. Okay. Let's do this first. Good. Very good. Let me see. Coming up high. Okay, that's very interesting. Double clicking stuff already. Miss Johnson, how are we doing?
We are good to go.
You're good to go. Dr. Cheryl, can you read the title of this particular slide for me, please?
The evolution of money.
Yes. Now we're going to go from barter to banking. Understanding why money exists before learning how to build wealth. And why is this so important? Because sometimes we can get in a space, and that's why I say financial literacy is something that should be expressed and exposed to us from elementary school. Well, if you're in a preparatory school, you probably have access to that. But when we're talking about from the commonplace of most public schools, how everything is situated and delved into, it's about creating more workers or potential workers or those that can be part of the industrial complex, even though everything is getting more digital and technical. But you still need individuals that's going to be a part of the different cogs that can allow for economic movement to happen. So if we don't understand why money exists, that means you could be saying, "Oh, I desire money," or we use that bad word to me, want. I want money. I want money. I want money. What do you want it for? What is the purpose of it? And if you want money, then you're going to recognize why you can't keep it because you're wanting it. Instead of number one, you can have a desire, and then what are the things that you're going to do in the respective marketplaces that you are afforded or exposed to say that, okay, how can I quantify my desires by either utilizing a skill, a gift or talent that I have, or a service that I may be able to provide to be able to have some level of exchange. So money has influenced human life for more than 5,000 years. So as much as that we may assume that, money has been eternal, no, it hasn't. It's only been around for about 5 millennia. So 5,000 years, is when you look at the grand scheme of the whole Earth cycle or the age of the Earth, it hasn't been that very long. But why did we get there? So we're going to deal with today from ancient bartering to digital currencies that are right now reshaping the world today. Now I know I'm probably asking Ms. Johnson to pull it up, but I forgot what's the name of that. I don't know if it was the Crypto Act, but I know it's something that this administration has just ratified around digital currency. So I'm gonna come to you in a couple of seconds. So if you can pull that up for me, so when I throw it to you, you'll be able to help push the conversation along. I would definitely appreciate it. And the discussion question for tonight: if money disappeared tomorrow, how would people exchange value? A very pertinent question. Because every one of us right now, those who are with us live, those who will see this later, you start to recognize everybody desires money and desires more of it. And those who claim, oh, I only want a little bit, let's be honest with yourself. No one wants just a little bit of it. Because if I come to you from even a biblical sense, it's the love of money is the root of all evil. The ability to earn more, the ability to have a bigger capacity to hold more and to invest more, there's nothing wrong with it. There's not one single thing wrong with that. I want you to, I'm here to help dispel some of those things that we continue to think like, oh my God, if I desire to be a millionaire, there must be something wrong with me because someone said I was supposed to move as a pious way, or I'm supposed to move as a poor person. And as those of us who've actually started to really exegete the word and you start to recognize even our Lord and Savior, if you're going to come at it from that religious standpoint, didn't pick people that were poor. He picked people who were workers. He picked people that were business owners. He picked people that were in some level of exchange in their respective marketplace in that particular realm, even though that Rome was running things. He didn't pick people that weren't doing nothing. He didn't pick people who were just sitting there and says, I don't know how to handle money or how to handle finances. So I'm gonna ask Dr. Cheryl as I'm gonna ask her what she's taking from the image of the screen, especially when she looks at the image on the left. What is she seeing, or what evokes for her?
Well, looking at the image on the left, there's a lot going on.
Oh,
It's
really? Talk to me. What you see is a lot going on.
Well, yeah, because there's different things that's on the coins, Bitcoins, you have the cents, you have all this other stuff. But when I'm looking at it, um, it to me, it just represents what's happening to different currency. And I think about when you talk the evolution of money, I think about our children and what our children look at money as. They don't even see coins, they don't even see dollars or cents or anything like that. They use their phones for everything. And currency, looking at currency now, I'm saying, what are we doing in regards to what we look at for the evolution of money and what it looks like now? For me sitting on that table, and if you show that, if I look at that for my grandfather wouldn't even know any of these things sitting here, maybe the coins, and the evolution where it's come from now. And what I'm seeing, that phone represents the generation now. The coins represent back then, and now moving forward into now, and I'm complete.
Thank you for that. Miss Johnson, were you able to find that act that was sort of ratified or sort of passed? And, how does that work with digital currency as we start to move in this technological age?
Yeah, I'm on an actual little rabbit hole dig right now.
Uh-oh, uh-oh, uh-oh. She went down rabbit hole. I love it.
All right, so starting off with the Genius Act. The Genius Act is the law that set rules for stablecoin.
Mm,
So to make sure that you can't issue interest against it, and it makes sure that it stays worth a dollar. That's the goal.
mm,
Now, on top of that, you have the Clarity Act that
mm-hmm.
sets the marketplace framework. So it's basically trying to compete with the Bitcoin, the Ethereum, so that they can help the dollar to retain value. But the flip side of it all is that going to a digital currency, you have a loss of privacy and anonymity, dependency on a network and power infrastructure in a time where we're having a energy crunch and a possible soon water crunch due to all the data centers. If there's an error, say it nicely, you might be out of luck. And there's an issuance risk because this network has to tie into other nations' networks.
Mm,
So there's a lot going on. I'm going back down the rabbit hole. I'm complete.
hmm In other words, the reason why Miss Johnson is saying she's going down the rabbit hole before we go to the next slide is that this is where some of the people, especially the conspiracy theorists, will say, New World Order and everything is going to be controlled, and you know your ways to move around, and in some ways there's a slight bit of truth in that. Not so much that it's a conspiracy, but some of these acts and some of these decisions or some of these things that you wonder why some of these people keep delving in and creating some of these particular coins on a respective network. Everyone's looking for some level of value that they can have some level of control over. And the thing about the Clarity Act, which is kind of nervous, which almost brings you back to the book George Orwell, 1984, and you're talking about Big Brother. We already know between, you going through lanes of traffic where before you had to pay a toll worker and now it's a camera. It works 24 hours a day, 706, 365 days. I said 765, 365 days out of the year. You don't have to worry about their vacation. You don't have to worry about their inhaling smog and all this other stuff. And so, as things become much more digitized, that means there's a way of having some level of control, and that goes back to having money because you're paying for something. You are paying for something. Yes, Miss Johnson, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I'm trying to dig through the mire.
Mm,
So decades ago, the dollar was backed by a gold standard that no
correct.
longer exists.
Because the good
So if
old
there's no
or
standard,
mm-hmm.
what are you basing the value of the alleged stable coin to? There's nothing to back it.
Mm. Well, good old Mr. Nixon, who was the worst president until the person that's in office right now, he was considered the worst president because after he decided to open up America to the opportunity of having traded with China, he decided at that time that it was wise enough, which he didn't recognize he was going to start to create the whole thing with the oil embargo and started screwing things up global economy is when he did take us off the gold standard, whereas before our dollars were backed by gold. So there was a reference point, a value. That means the government could only print but so much money depending upon the value of gold. Now we went into the straight up fiat, FIAT space, whereas now, okay, the Federal Reserve, has been around since the 1920s, became much more in control of the currency because now they were the ones printing the paper that they were now loaning back to the government. So we're starting to see this is kind of interesting. And now we're talking about bartering and banking. You start to say, so wait a minute, so we took ourselves off for a standard that gave our money real value. We put the hands of the printing press or the print value or the printing opportunities of printing our dollars as a country into the hands of a private corporation because technically the Federal Reserve is a private corporation, even though the federal government has the right to have some sort of governance, but it's technically a private corporation. And so there's a lot of things that we're seeing that based upon even the last 50 years, we're talking about 5,000 years of where money has been around, but in the last 50 or some odd years, how things have definitively changed to now how we're talking about these particular acts that are moving towards being as part of the law. And now how do we move in the grand scheme of things? So before money, for thousands of years, people traded through barter. That means if you had a good or service and you knew what it was, there was no real standard of unit. That's why even if for those of you who are have some level of spirituality, and allow yourself that background, you start to remember, there was hardly anything with coins. It was like, okay, give me two of your sheep for my one camel. Now there was no real differentiation of how to say that this was a space of value in because it was just bartering. It was like, okay, this person's has a bunch of camels and this one has a bunch of sheep. This person would like some sheep. This person would need a camel. Okay, they have a conversation and they figure out, okay, what they feel would allow them to have a possible transaction. So as we see here, exchanging goods and services directly with no standard unit of value, this became known as the double coincidence of wants. That's why when we go back to the fact that even wants aren't good, because even back then when they started recognizing that everything was based on bartering, everything was based on a want. Only reason why I'm doing this trade because I want something. Not that I desire it or do I necessarily need it. I just want it. I want this. I want that. So stop wanting. Because anything that you move in the space of wanting, after a while you start to feel, well, did I really get my full value? Or was that an even exchange? Did I establish a level of trade for the bartering? So examples was grain for livestock, fish for clothing, wood for tools, labor for food. So the core challenge was bartering only works when both people need what the other has. The items have similar value and both are available at the same time. And there's a lot of times that sometimes we consider bartering, the new age for bartering is like when we think of internships. Like if someone's in college and they're doing an internship and they may not necessarily get a stipend, or they may receive a stipend, to cover maybe their expenses to go to and fro to the internship, or they may give them a little something so they can have some lunch money. But it's technically not a job; it's an internship. They're bartering your time and your body and your ability to say that I am looking for certain experiences because I'm working towards something and I'm willing to give you this amount of time so I can get a trade-off. So you think about interning these days, that would be the closest of bartering these days. Or sometimes, even if you're in business right now as an entrepreneur, sometimes you may be working with someone and they'll say, well, I can't afford this. Okay, my time is worth X amount of dollars. So if you do this, that can equate to the time frame that I may have invested. But then it'll be up to me to say if that's feasible for me, if I decide that that works, because maybe I really, truly just desire the resources. As Mr. Sampson is coming into the building. So when we start to think about that, this double coincidence of wants was very general in a space for a long time. And things were built that way. People recognized that they needed something. I either have this skill or I have this item. What can I get for what you may have that I need at that particular time so we can do a swap? Any questions or any thoughts about this slide before we move forward? And as always, let me check in with Dr. Cheryl. As she looks at this picture on this particular slide, what comes to mind for you, Dr. Cheryl?
The main thing that comes to mind is that you always need a bartering process, always need at least two people. That's what I'm looking at this photo. And then actually thinking about the two people, you have to have something of value to exchange. I need what you have, you got what I have. Just like right now, the exchange of knowledge that you have and the skills that we're gaining. But in order for me to be able to gain from that, it's like I'm bartering my time for this. Give me a little of your time so you can learn this, things of that nature. So I'm looking at the what we sometimes throw away is the human aspect of bartering. Because if two people have something of value and they decide to choose and offer that up, then that could be very valuable and we could build relationships from there. And I'm complete.
Excellent. Anyone else? Any thoughts by anyone else before we move on to the next slide? Because
Oh
we
yeah, when I was thinking about
go
bartering, I was thinking about the lunch table. You have
ahead.
Doritos, I want Cheetos, even spot. Simplest, most the simplest form of bartering there is. I'm complete.
So that's what you did at the lunch table, Miss Johnson?
I went to Catholic school, so I sat there with my box milk. I did none of this stuff. Nothing.
Please, I was getting ready to say, who bringing what lunch? You had to eat what they had. We could
Wait a
not
minute,
bring outside
y'all
food.
couldn't have no choices at Catholic school?
No.
No.
Wow, they said that in unison. Okay, okay, that's very interesting. Very interesting. Commodity money. This is now we're starting to move. We still have bartering still around, but now we're starting to move as a commodities. And I'm gonna ask Ms. Johnson if you can find out um, the example or the meaning of the word commodities, because we're gonna get into that because there's so many commodities that we trade, so many commodities that we look at. And I always think about the movie Trading Places when I think about commodities. That was my first reference point with a young Eddie Murphy and a young Dan Aykroyd, and recognizing that when you really look at it, regardless of all the funny stuff that was happening, it was basically about commodities. So people began using items everyone valued, from Conrad shells to precious metals, as a trusted medium of exchange. So what was used? Sometimes it was salt. Sometimes it was shells. Sometimes it could have been tobacco. Could have been livestock. And precious metals all served as early money across different cultures. Why did it work? These became early forms of money because people trusted their value. A trust shared across communities. So that means if you're not in communication and someone doesn't trust that what you're bringing to the table has value, and these days, people are making millions and billions of dollars off of just paper. And they take that paper and they go invest or buy something else, and now they have an asset for that paper. And as we were talking a couple of minutes ago, especially when Nixon took us off of the gold standard, now that you're printing money, now it makes it easier for you to generate debt. Because when the Federal Reserve prints money, they borrow that money from the central bank, which the Federal Reserve is for the United States, and they loan that money to the government. You have to understand this. And then at the same time, they loan some of that same resources to some of the major banks that are across this country, that they get access to this capital. Says, you know what, we're desiring to, you know, do X, Y, and Z. And that's when you hear about, the Fed funds rate. And then that Fed funds rate is the barometer of, what banks have to borrow from the Federal Reserve so that they can have capital to do what they desire to do. And see, the key insight is money began as something society agreed. See, it's always about an agreement. How is it aligned? That it agreed that it had some level of value, not something inherently valuable on its own. So, Ms. Johnson, what did you find out about commodities? And do we deal with commodities every day?
Yeah, a basic definition is a commodity is a basic good or raw material that can be bought and sold, like wheat, oil, coffee, or metals. And the characteristics about it, it has to be standardized. Everybody has to agree to the value. The price is driven by the market. So whatever you're willing to exchange it for creates the value of the item. And let's see, you don't care where it comes from as long as it maintains the same value. And I'm complete.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. And so the reason why I said that it was funny about trading places, because it was about, frozen orange juice. See, now some of you probably run back and go see trading places. But it was about frozen concentrated orange juice. That was what, was being traded, what was being attempted to be manipulated. And see, as Miss Johnson was sharing, if you're looking for bacon, that's pork bellies. That's where bacon more or less comes from. That's a commodity. So people, there's markets out there that people are purchasing and manipulating the value of these particular commodities. Oil is a major commodity. That's why when oil goes up to $100 a barrel, you start to recognize, how many gallons of oil, are in a barrel. It's really 50 gallons of oil. So, we talk about even that. How do we get to those respective values? And so if a barrel of oil gets to $100 a barrel, that means each gallon of oil in that barrel is worth $2. And that's before it gets refined. That's before it gets to this level of the food chain and that level of the food chain. And next thing you know, if it's that high, that means we're spending $4 or $5, depending upon where you're at in the United States, for a gallon of gas to put in your vehicle. So we may not see as like, oh my God, how does that affect me? It does affect you. And then it affects the price of goods and services. It affects the truck driver that has to drive some of the goods and services that you are needing or desiring to get to your marketplace. And we're going to come to you, Ms. Clarke, or coming to you. And for it to arrive, there's a particular value in that. So then there's a surcharge on top of that. And then it becomes a surcharge on top of that. And then those people right now who are feeling squeezed or feeling some sort of tension because of the way prices are, and especially after the promises that were allegedly made by the person who came in 2024 when he came back into office, he has not kept his word. Yes, Miss Clarke. What's your question?
The person who went before you, I'm sorry, I didn't catch his name, but he mentioned that it has to be standardized in his definition of commodity. Elaborate a little bit for me, because I'm thinking if it means that everyone places the same value, that means there has to be consensus on the price also, shouldn't there be? Or
There
is
has
it
to be no.
flexible?
Well, there's a flexibility in that. That's a good question. There's a flexibility in that because depending upon what is being treated as more valuable. See, you can walk in with, say, a gold chain and say, you can take that gold chain to a pawn shop, and even though the gold chain could be worth $500, but based upon the fact that the pawn shop has to make some level of money, they're going to decrease the value because you're probably going in there to say, okay, I need to borrow $300 against this gold chain. It says, well, this gold chain is worth 500. I know this chain is worth 500, but I'm not going to give you that full value. It's the same way of, and I'll even correlate even better. You go purchase a new car off the car lot. You go spend $50,000. You are feeling wonderful. You're about to jump in this vehicle that can talk back to you, warm your seats, keep your behind warm. AC is wonderful. All the good gadgets, all left and right and center. You drive off that lot. You signed all the paperwork. You put your money down. You know how much your payments are. Drive that car for, say, maybe a couple of weeks. You come back after like 2, 3 weeks. You know what? I don't really desire this car right now. Now the car dealership will take the car back from you. Do you think they're gonna give you $50,000 for it? No, 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 no. That car, once you drove it off that lot, dropped its value. Its initial inherent value has already dropped at least 20% as soon as you drove off the lot. So now you do have a car that you have a 50,000 or whatever the loan amount that you have on the vehicle that you are responsible in paying back. But now the dealership is already going to say, says, wait a minute, okay, you drove this car for about 2 weeks. You may probably didn't even put 1,000 miles. Maybe you may not even put 500 miles on the car. Okay, that's wonderful. We'll take the car back. Okay, okay, we'll give you $40,000 towards this other vehicle that you're now looking at. So now you're already $10,000 under. Because the banks or the credit places are going to be ready to say, wait a minute, based upon the value that we've agreed upon, but now what you have has depreciated. So it's a known commodity. That's why they usually say, even when it comes to buying vehicles, it's sometimes better to buy used or, as they say, certified pre-owned. Because just getting a new car is wonderful. It's a beautiful achievement. Is it really worth the value of it? So hopefully I answered your question in regards of connecting it back to commodities.
Yeah, but I still wonder, how is it standardized? How does that work?
The standardization is always based on community and whoever's in charge.
Okay. Hmm.
It's just like, okay, I'll give you another example. Why is the British pound always worth more than the American dollar? Because it's agreed upon. It's agreed upon that the United Kingdom has a currency that they technically pulled themselves out of the European Union to still make sure that they have their own currency and they keep the value of that currency inflatedly high. And it's agreed upon. Now, of course, they'll trade every day and it may be $1.26 today. It could be $1.50 2 weeks from now, depending upon the flow and the value of how things are moving geopolitically. And sometimes it's about the marketplace, how things are moving. So yeah, everything starts with establishing a level of inherent value, and then is someone willing to honor the fact that that's what it is. That's why when you see most things traded globally, America's doing their best to make sure we keep everything in dollars. Because say if a barrel of oil was traded in British pounds, our our ability to afford that if it was based on British pounds, it would cost us even more money. But by keeping it in dollars, there's a certain inherent value that globally different countries are saying, I still desire that American dollar. So that's probably why one of the other reasons why we stick our nose into a lot of business that we don't have no reason to, because it really, at the end of the day, is all about the money. As we move on.
Muchas gracias.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. And as my wife was alluding to earlier, coins done changed everything. The birth of official currency. Governments began producing standardized coins. Remember, it always starts with governments. The Kingdom of Lydia, modern day Turkey. So that means that was back in the day during the Turkish Empire and, moving towards Macedonia, which we would call now modern day Iraq and Iran and Saudi Arabia and all that stuff, the Macedonian Empire and all that good stuff, is credited with minting the world's first official currency around 600 BC. Easier to carry, count, and harder to dispute in value. Encouraged trade between cities and nations. Gold and silver became trusted standards worldwide. See, it all started from the fact of the matter is like, look, we don't need this man about to stab this other man because they said, I traded 2 camels for a sheep and the sheep was a bad sheep and now he wants some chickens and no. He started to recognize, okay, how can we create a standard? How can we create something that allows us to have some level of control? So even if someone sets a price, okay, I need X amount of coins to purchase this thing. And started moving away from the bartering system and saying, okay, you have 2 sheep. Okay, I'll give you this 1 horse. We eliminate that. The horse is worth 20 pieces of silver. And 1 sheep is worth 20 pieces of silver. So that means now instead of going back and forth and just trading a sheep for a horse, they said, okay, here's your 20 pieces of silver, and then you purchase this, give me your 20 pieces of silver. Any thoughts or any ideas? Or let me check in with Dr. Cheryl. Dr. Cheryl, would Mr. OT understand this particular slide right here?
Oh, show. He
And
sure
why is that? From your perspective, why is that?
Well, because this was the thing. I mean, negotiated with coins and things of that nature, paper money. That was the first, I'm sorry, maybe I'm going too far, but the coins right now, understanding back in the day, that's what my grandfather, would have. He also had a jar full of coins. And, just to think about it, Dr. Clarke has a jar full of coins everywhere. And, he doesn't let me throw away any coins or whatever, not throw away coins. And it's just amazing. Like now, pennies are no longer, a part of that. And it's amazing to me is that when you're looking at a generation to generation, what it represents, our children now probably will not understand what this coin thing will be. And you go to museums and you look at it, we get fascinated by some of the coins here. So maybe you're onto something to from years to come and decades to come along that what you may save for your grandchildren will have value. And I'm complete.
Because as Dr. Cheryl just alluded to, the United States Mint has stopped. How's the best way to say? Stopped crafting pennies, and they said it costs about 4 or 5 cents to make 1 penny. So now they've eliminated the penny. There's no more pennies being printed or minted. So, and eventually they're thinking about the nickel is next, but they're saying that the nickel still has an inherent value. And even the other day, I went to a store where I was supposed to get, I think, 47 cents back. I actually took out and paid with cash instead of using a card. And when I paid with cash, the young man looked and he started recognizing, and he had to give me, because he had no penny. So he literally gave me 50 cents. There's no more pennies. The store didn't have pennies. And so we're moving into a space now, or sometimes now they made the place that you go into may ask you, can we round you up or round you down? Because there's no more pennies being minted. And as I see someone's throwing something in the chat, I said, but they wasted money making a bicentennial Trump coin. Why would you say that, Miss Johnson? Was that a waste?
Yes, because people would literally try to buy it just to melt it down as if burning an effigy. So yes, it was an absolute waste.
Well, at least we didn't get the $250 bill. Thank God. At least they stopped that. But that's neither here nor there. The rise of paper money, as Dr. Cheryl Clarke started to give us that little expert advice and early prelude. Eventually, carrying large amounts of gold became difficult. That would be, people would come try to, harm you up at night, boy, because everyone got to sleep sometime. Paper money first emerged in China during the Yuan dynasty, transforming how value was exchanged across the world. Number one, gold certificates. Banks began issuing paper certificates representing stored gold held in vaults. Like when you hear about us having Fort Knox here in the United States, that is a true place. That is a place where we still have gold, and they still have a lot of things of value that the government has some level of inherent space, but technically it's just sitting there and it's worth something based upon what gold is trading per ounce, but it's not backing no longer our dollar. Because technically we've printed so much money, the gold that we even have in Fort Knox wouldn't be able to still back all the dollars the trillions upon trillions of dollars that are out there in space. Number two, these certificates eventually became paper currency accepted as payment every single way. People start saying, wait a minute, I don't have to walk around with no gold. I'm looking for these nice little round coins. I can just hand you a piece of paper. How you doing? This is Dr. Gregory Clarke, and I hope you enjoyed this past video. Now, once again, I invite you to become a part of the Comeback Collective Circle on this wonderful time frame. And not only by enjoying the video, but going to get my book, Life in the Huddle. You can get this copy and get your copy today, right now, by going to the Amazon.com website and type in Life in the Huddle. This is a great book, not only for yourself, but it's a very autobiographical tome that I've written. And the reason why it's so important, you can connect with the Comeback Collective Circle. You can support this community by financial means. You can do it via Cash App at $Gregory Clarke D Min, or you can go by Venmo to Gregory Clarke D Min. Or if you desire to do it via Zelle or PayPal, you can simply use the same email address, esquire971@gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed the journey. Can't wait for you to see you as a part of the circle as we grow the community. Have a great day.